This is the In Focus podcast from The Hindu.
Welcome to another episode of the Hindus in Focus podcast. I'm Zubeda Hamid, your host for today. A few weeks ago, the richest family in Britain, the Hinduja family, was convicted in a Swiss court, and 4 of its members were given a prison sentence for exploiting their domestic workers brought from India to a villa in Geneva. They were accused of paying the workers a pittance, making them work for long hours, and not allowing them to leave the premises. The family has said that it will appeal the verdict, but the case throws a spotlight upon an issue that has long been neglected in India: the rampant exploitation and abuse of domestic help in the country and abroad. India has not ratified the International Labour Organization's Domestic Workers Convention number 189, which advocates for the rights of domestic workers, nor has it ratified the ILO's Forced Labour Protocol, which would make it mandatory for the country to safeguard the interests of workers. India is estimated to have about 50 million domestic workers, largely women, primarily drawn from the 5 states of Assam, Odisha, West Bengal, Jharkhand, and Chhattisgarh, with hundreds of thousands migrating within the state, to other states, and abroad. But a law to protect their rights, which would cover their wages, their working hours, their holidays, and other rights, has been pending with the central government for some years now. So, what is the legal situation of domestic workers in the country? Why is the government dragging its feet on bringing about a national legislation to protect them? Are the many recruitment agencies that have mushroomed across the country subject to regulation? What happens when our workers go abroad? How do other countries such as Indonesia and Philippines protect their workers? We delve into these questions and more with Sonia George, National Vice President of the Self Employed Women's Association and Asian Executive Member of the International Domestic Workers Federation. Good morning and welcome to the Hindus in Focus podcast, Ms. Sonia George.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ma'am, to start off with, could you tell us about the legal position of domestic workers in India? What kind of legal protections are they entitled to, or do they not have too many of these protections?
Domestic workers, as you know, they are completely informal workforce and they work in somebody else's houses, means mostly private homes. So, first of all, private homes are not considered as workplace, or in the Indian legal language are not considered as establishments. That means they don't come under the definition of establishments where an employer-employee relationship is established, and also other entitlements like, when there is an employer-employee relationships, employers are obliged to certain kind of uh, legalities and entitlements to their worker. And mostly in India, you know that for informal sector means that is anything under no 10, number 10 means less than 10 people. It's completely informal, and because of the nuances of this private home, domestic workers are not considered as workers, and there is no employer-employee relationship established in legality with respect to domestic workers. So that means there are very little chances of establishing or the existing legal law framework getting extended to domestic workers. That is not at all applicable to domestic workers in many of the cases. But what happens is that now at present in India, 14 states have announced minimum wages for domestic workers. So maybe it is not up to the mark, means when considering their the skills they provide, the kind of occupation they are involved, and the risks that they face in private employers' houses, it is nothing. Maybe it is far below the minimum wages with respect to the state that they are working, but still, in paper, there are minimum wages existing for domestic workers in 14, at least 14 states in India. So that's the only thing. And the other thing is that maybe Maharashtra, in the state of Maharashtra, there is a welfare act that is existing for domestic workers, and Jharkhand in 2016 has passed kind of regulating the recruitment agencies that kind of a law is existing in Jharkhand. So these are the things that are existing in India with regard to domestic workers. But on the other side, when it comes to ILO convention ratification, India has signed, maybe in the beginning of the discussion when it happened in International Labour Conference far back in 2011, India was not willing to sign or approve the ILO Convention 189. But the second year, when it was like going for voting, India has signed. India also took part in this historic convention for domestic workers. But unfortunately, uh, after means it was passed in 2012, and now it is like we are in 2024 still. India has no policy, India has no comprehensive law for domestic workers or to protect the rights of domestic workers. So this is the situation in the country now.
So this means that domestic workers are any of the labor laws, the protection of women from sexual harassment law, are any of these applicable to to domestic workers?
Yes, actually, legally speaking, the Sexual Harassment at Workplace Act, the POSH Act, which we call the POSH Act, is applicable to domestic workers, and maybe that is the only significant law where domestic work and domestic workers are defined, and special provisions for domestic workers to complain and to proceed with sexual harassment, that is actually very well explained in that particular law. But unfortunately, again, the implementation of that act is not possible without other labor laws existing. For example, that is one of the first things that I have been saying. Uh, how do a domestic worker provide an evidence that she is working in a particular house with a particular employer, because she has no registration, she has no employer employee relationships, and the house is not recognized as an establishment or a workplace. So something happens in that particular workplace, even though she can complain according to the POSH Act, how do we proceed with that? That is the question. Means, how do we bring proper evidences for such a case? And I think, I don't know where a case against a domestic worker or against a domestic worker's employer have been proved in that case. That means that constrains the domestic worker to give complaints to the local complaints committee according to the POSH Act. And that means, even though it is defined, uh, when it comes to implementation, it is not working well in the country.
You talked about several states that have now imposed the minimum wage requirement for domestic workers. Kerala has now announced that it will come up with a new law to protect the welfare of domestic workers, but in general, governments, as you told us, have been seen to be dragging their feet over a law such as this. Tell us about the draft national bill on domestic workers. Why is it still pending at the central government?
Yes, actually, there have been a constant push from domestic workers unions and membership based organizations and from the ILO. Means, even before the ILO convention has passed, India government has had set up a task force to bring a national policy for domestic workers, and we were all members. I'm representing Seva Self-Employed Women's Association, the only women informal sector central trade union in India, and we were also part of this task force, national task force, and we have actually, after many sittings and all, we have prepared a very comprehensive policy for the country, starting from like by 2010. The first draft was completed and it was submitted to the government. Maybe it was the first, it was then the UPA government which was ruling the center, and it was almost up to the cabinet. And but finally, when it reached the cabinet, it got rejected. That was the situation, and the same situation happened when the NTA also came. The policy, several drafts of the national policies were there, and we had many rounds of discussions. But what had happened is that when it goes to the cabinet, the last stage of implementation or adoption, it gets rejected somehow. So what we have understood is that, again, the complexity of an employer-employee relationship in a kind of work like domestic work is that everyone, means all of us, means people, all the lawmakers, of the country, including the president, the prime minister, the ministers, the officers, no, all are employees of domestic workers. That means to make domestic work no a legally entitled kind of job, it implicates a lot to all the employers, means all of the common people in the society, and that makes it little sometimes no people think that it will be like when something like this comes, there are so many legal bindings that has to be followed, and it will affect each and every people who are even in the higher positions. So that means that approach to the law, that approach to the policy, that approach to the sector every times make this policy getting rejected in the decision making bodies, and that is what our experience also. So the national platform of domestic workers, at one point we were also advocating for the national policy, but at one time means like maybe around 2000 15-16, the national platform of domestic workers, consisting of domestic workers unions, central trade unions, and other membership based organizations in the country, we thought now we should stop asking for the policy, we should ask for a comprehensive law. So the national platform themselves have drafted a very comprehensive law. First, we have drafted a set of non negotiables where we want to establish home as a workplace, the rights of domestic workers with minimum wage, social security, and right to work, regulation of domestic work, and right to of migrant domestic workers. But and we campaigned with this non-negotiables with a comprehensive law framework, and that campaign happened no last 10 years of even the NDA government. It has happened, and we have been going around to ministers, labor minister, prime minister, and the petitions committee of both Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha, and several rounds of discussions with the members of parliament. All these things have happened, even statewide, even national wide. Many protests at Jantar Mandal and national protests we have organized, and this comprehensive law have been discussed widely, but still, we were not able to succeed to make it becoming a reality, or the government taking it seriously to the parliament till the end of the last session. So that is where this process of legalizing domestic workers is there. But at least some states, they that is what I was saying. Maharashtra has a welfare act. Jharkhand has brought this act way back in 2016. It has its limitations, but still they have an act. Kerala government is now pushing for a domestic workers uh, regulation act, and also regulating the placement agencies which are recruiting domestic workers. So these processes are going on, but it's very slow, and the collective bargaining process of domestic workers, it's not up to the mark as such. No other trade union activities or trade union collective bargaining processes are happening because of the limitations, and the main limitation is private homes are the workplaces of domestic workers, so that is hindering the entire process of lawmaking in the country.
You spoke to us a little bit about recruiting agencies, ma'am. So, talk to us about this. So, over the past decade or 15 years, so many agencies have come up that organize a whole domestic workforce for households in urban cities, drawing upon labor from villages. So, are workers better protected when they go through an agency? Is this a regulated or an unregulated sector, or does it just add another layer of exploitation towards them?
From our experiences, it is there are two phases of it, or two ways to look at it, because for example, when I talk from the perspective of Seva is a women workers trade union, and when we started organizing domestic workers way back 40 years back, um, in the country, in Kerala and in other states, one of the things was this was the most like unorganized sector, and there was no kind of force or any forms of collectiveness to in within the sector. So what say, while organizing domestic workers or people, one of our approach was that people who have been losing their jobs in other sectors, other traditional sectors, they all were in search of some other kind of alternate jobs. And many women, like in domestic work, I think around 90% are women. So many women have opted to do this kind of services like domestic work, babysitting, or home nursing, or whatever it is. So that time itself, Seva has thought that why can't we organize these workers as a workers collective? No, so the workers coming by themselves, getting trained, getting more skilled, and workers should opt work through this collective. That the collective should monitor the entire process of getting work, getting in connection with the employers, have a direct contact with the employer in order to prevent exploitation or any kind of abuses that could happen in the workplace with relation to personal protection and also employment protection. So this collective have means it has been working, means it has more than 40 years of experience of workers collectives, and I can proudly say that these workers are really organized. They demand a very decent wage with decent working conditions, that is actually spelled even in the first association with any employer who is coming to ask for work through these domestic workers collectives. So that we have created a kind of formalization of domestic work through the workers collectives. That is one side of the story, where trade unions like us have been organizing workers. But on the other side, when this sector, actually the demand for domestic work was increasing amongst basically amongst the urban population, and domestic workers like interstate migrant or intrastate, going from one district, backward districts in a particular state, to the urban areas of cities of the state. These kind of internal migrations that were happening, and also the local rural urban migration was happening. The domestic workers needs, it has increased, demands have increased, and then this agency, slowly this private recruitment agencies, illegal, without any registration, without any proper procedures, these agencies have come up. They have started recruiting domestic workers, and they take a huge amount from the clients, means the customers, plus they demand huge money for the domestic workers, with like a very, maybe some agencies take 10, 20, 30 percentage of domestic workers wages, and these are illegal, and they have found different ways actually to exploit the workers, in terms of they give 1 month service to a particular employer house. They will withdraw from them from there, and they give them to another house, means they get the service charges from both the house, means within months they get many service charges. So and the legality of the process, because there is no written contract or there is no agreement such that domestic workers money will directly go to the recruitment agencies, and they prefer to give whatever they like, not according to the work that the domestic workers have done. So that is the story of the private recruitment agencies, that domestic workers have been finding employment all over the country. And the most uh, what you call marginalized or exploited amongst them are the migrant workers, especially interstate migrant workers. I'll speak about the international migrant workers maybe later, but interstate migrant workers especially, it promoted child domestic work a lot, means from the backward districts of India, like Odisha, Jharkhand, Bihar, uh, UP, many domestic, Tamil Nadu, it was means like a big trend to in Kerala, means lot of child domestic workers started migrating to these states through this uh, irregular kind of or illegal recruitment agencies. Like the agents will be their neighbors or relatives, or they have a big, a vicious circle that is working between the states in order to facilitate this process of migration. And especially the child domestic workers, the girls, are actually exploited a lot, and we ourselves have involved or got into many of such cases and have rescued the workers. But some cases we couldn't rescue the workers. Some we have cases of like cases projected as suicides, or different kinds of experiences that we also have undergone while looking at these cases of interstate migrants, especially through the recruitment agency. So recruitment agencies now establish themselves as very highly high profile kind of agencies, with a lot of domestic workers going to them. with the feeling that they will get a job the next day itself when they register in this recruitment agencies, and that is how these domestic workers are exploited through this process. So regulating these recruitment agencies, it's high time that India should have really a policy towards regulating this recruitment agencies. Once the rights of domestic workers are established, we feel that the recruitment agencies will slowly even fade away, or they will have a system to regulate themselves. Otherwise, this exploitation will continue. That is our experiences, and we should promote like workers collectives, where workers come together and go to work, uh, engaging in proper freedom of association and collective bargaining. That should be the best alternative in terms of domestic workers coming together and protecting themselves, promoting decent work.
You said that more than 90% of the domestic workforce is female, is women, and many of them young women and even children. Talk to us a little bit about the sex and the caste factor when it comes to exploitation and abuse in India.
Yes. See, again, domestic work, it is it's a highly gendered work. That means one of the best examples, maybe we can say that when states are fixing minimum wages for domestic workers, it is even lesser than the existing minimum wage of the state for unskilled workers. That means domestic workers even is considered as unskilled work or underskilled work. And why is it so? Because it is highly women oriented, women dominated work. It is considered as an extension of housework, house care work, where women are taken to other houses, that you practice all this cooking, cleaning, or looking after the children or old in your own house. So this is an extension of your household work. That means you are not a skilled worker. You can get, there is no system to uh, monitor your payment or legalize your payment. You can pay whatever. It's cheap labor, basically. That means that is the politics of domestic work with respect to gender. So that is something that is happening all over the state, all over the country. That domestic work is considered as very cheap labor. There's no fixed charges for the works that you are doing in that particular houses. But on the other side, when you are talking about domestic work, what we feel is that it's really skilled work, and but people think that it's unskilled, and they think that it is it the class relationships within this work is again obvious when it comes to who is going to domestic work. That is where I was saying, rural to urban migration, migration from economically and culturally backward states to other states, so-called progressive or so-called rich states of the country. That means, for example, migrant domestic workers, when you look at the majority of them are from the tribal community. Many of the rural migration that happens within the state, they are from the Dalit community. So the caste factor, or the indigenous factor, or that marginalized communities getting into this work is obvious in this relationship that is happening. That means you are already representing the marginalized population. That means you don't have to be protected. Your rights, there are nobody to speak about your rights. You can work under our mercy. That is the attitude of the employers, or the particular upper class sector towards this marginalized sections of people who are choosing domestic work. So that kind of discrimination even happens within the houses. We have been dealing with many such kind of discrimination, starting from not giving them proper food. They have separate kinds of plates and rooms, and they are not allowed to use the bathrooms within the houses. In many flats, domestic workers really face such kind of issues, that they cannot uh, use the bathrooms within the employees' houses. They may have to use the service bathrooms available in the apartments in high-rise buildings, or they may not even go for. Uh, they can wash. They have to wash the toilets, but they're not allowed to use it. They don't have access to it. And in many times when 24 hours live-in workers are staying, they are not even provided proper rest facilities. Many of them stay even in the corner of the kitchen. So all such kind of discrimination, we feel that caste plays a big factor in those discriminations. So that is many cases, many such cases of abuses and exploitations are reported, and we have been dealing with it. And some people prefer, religious affinities of people, caste affinities of people. When they choose domestic workers, they say no. They are asking their caste, their religion, their social background, and they will have an interview by themselves, the employer, and then only they'll recruit the domestic workers. So all such preferences are existing in a society, highly caste-oriented society like India, and we are dealing with many such cases every day.
Talk to us a little bit about the situation of migrant workers, domestic workers going from India abroad, ma'am. Now, the Hinduja case highlighted this rampant exploitation of domestic workers, but this is not the first such case. Tell us about this situation. Has migration of workers gone up over the years when they're going abroad more? Are they entitled to protection under laws in the country that they go and work in?
That's again a very, very complex question in the context of domestic workers, because in India, first of all, there is a very stringent policy that domestic work basically is banned, maybe in GCC countries and all, below 30 years. So that is something the government is saying that it has been established to protect the rights of domestic workers, not protect them from getting exploited in the destination countries. But this is a very, what we have understood is that with the experience of working with migrant domestic workers for many years now, many of the domestic workers, the recruitment chains that are around local and national and international recruitment chains, they promise these poor workers, they approach them directly in their own villages, and they say that don't worry, that you just give your consent, that's enough. We will give you a passport with which you can migrate. Maybe it will be a forged passport. Fake passport means either their photos or their age, that below 30 years nobody can migrate. So that means all the passport has to be above 30 years. So that process is happening quite largely in the country, means through this illegal recruitment chains. So that is one of the biggest issues that Indian domestic workers are facing in destination countries, because their passports are not real passports. They travel, and maybe in GCC we can see that the kafala system that is existing. That means you need a sponsor, and the sponsor is the sole responsible person for this migration, and he has to deposit certain amounts, and the entire power of the sponsor over the domestic workers is visible in terms of like all their documents have to be transferred to uh, the sponsor, means their passport, their visas, their contracts, everything, and they don't have access to they don't have access to anything that they have to support. So once they are in trouble, they are not able to uh, get their documents back. That means they have to really get themselves rescued illegally from that particular houses, and they may go with the help of like local persons or other workers from other countries, and they may reach the embassies or consulates in the respective destination countries, and they have to wait for amnesties till it comes during the festival season or something. That is how these processes have been continuing. But the thing is that what in through our experience, once they come back, they are deported. These agents again, maybe these agents or some other agents again will approach them, and they will offer them again the same process, same kind of irregular, illegal migration process. We call them as pushing. It is called as pushing, that they have been pushed through a separate desk in the immigration uh, um, departments of within the airports. Particular airports have different systems, the immigration have different kind of adjustments within that, and this process have been called pushing. And they go again to another country, maybe with another passport. So we have actually found out domestic workers like with 5 6 passports with different age, no, and they have gone and come back. They may be deported, but this process is continuing. Maybe now it is not that easy to do that, but still there are many irregular chains that are happening within different airports and within different migration processes of the countries where this irregular recruitment agents and agencies have domination, have control over the immigration processes, and they recruit domestic workers. So that is the situation of Indian domestic workers. And when they go to the destination countries, as I said, this ban, it's a very difficult issue to tackle. And the second thing is, there are no proper bilateral relationships that are established uh, to get the domestic work regulated in the destination countries. That means the domestic workers themselves are not able to articulate their rights in the destination countries. First of all, they don't have documents, so they cannot do anything by themselves. And freedom of association is completely banned for, especially for the workers from the global south in these destination countries. So that means they are completely scattered. The embassies are not well aware of the situation of these domestic workers. And for example, a country like India, we have a very old immigration act. It's like the 1983 act still existing, and there was an attempt to bring a new immigration bill in the last session of the parliament. Means, way back, I think it started in 2019. It was introduced, but suddenly the new bill was withdrawn. And now what we heard is that during the last session of the parliament, we heard that they will not table it in the last tenure. Maybe we don't know what is happening in this new term of the government, but I think a new set of bill is being prepared. And what is the approach we are waiting? Means we have been campaigning with the external affairs ministry and all, means to raise the concerns of this poor informal workers, where how do they get participation, how do they get recognized in the bilateral agreements, in labor contracts, in visas, so that their rights with regard to safe workplace, safe migration, decent work, social protection, and a proper rehabilitation, how this process could be established within through a legal process. That is what we are pushing with the ministry even, but we don't know what is going to happen. But Indian domestic workers, with respect to the present legal systems, they are not protected in the destination countries. Either it is GCC or it is European countries or American countries, wherever it is, they are not protected. And what means, that is how we have been seeing this kind of exploitation. The latest case being the Hinduja case, and that is not even in GCC. GCC, we can say that they don't have proper labor laws and they are not following it. But a country like Switzerland, they have very good labor laws, and labor laws are being practiced there. And the local workers are enjoying rights there, where these Indian domestic workers are exploited in that countries also. So one thing that we are seeing is that because of these legal provisions, age ban and all that, domestic workers, many of them preferred visiting visas or tourist visas, so they get go for short span of time without a labor contract. And once they reach there, they think that they can convert it into labor visas, but many of them are not able to do that. So they are not even included in the country's list of labor migrants. That means they are either tourists or visitors. They are not labor contract migrants. So that is again a big danger for domestic workers, and that tendency post COVID is increasing. Many women are going for baby care or house care or such kind of things through visiting visas, and they are not considered as workers in the destination country. So that is really going to affect the situation of Indian migrant workers outside the country.
Last question, ma'am, before we wrap up. So, we know that now Indian workers are not protected in the destination country they go to, but Indians are not the only ones who go as domestic workers abroad. A lot of the domestic labor is also from countries like Indonesia and Philippines. Do they have better laws protecting their citizens? Is that a model that India can draw upon?
Yes, I think maybe the best practices that we have seen is with relation to the Filipino migrant domestic workers. Philippines have really worked well towards, Philippines. is the only country in Asia where the ILO convention is ratified, and no other countries have ratified the ILO convention. That means Philippines have taken this responsibility of their migrant domestic workers, and they are very well aware of the situations, and they are pro labor, and they have very good relationships with, they try to establish very good labor contracts with the destination countries through the migrant laws of the laws that the government has made, and they very well act on the rights of the domestic workers in the destination countries. So I think Philippines is the only model that we have now in order to follow with respect to the rights of migrant domestic workers. And that's the only country who have ratified Convention 189 on decent work for domestic workers. No other countries, unfortunately, have ratified Convention 189. Even we are not seeing any attempts in the near future in that level, but I'm representing International Domestic Workers Federation also. So as part of, so we represent uh, uh, in most of the countries of Asia, we have unions, federations of domestic workers, and through that network, we have been pushing for the implementation, for the ratification of C189 in Asian countries. The initiatives are going on, but it's very far. That is what we have been seeing, except Philippines. So, Filipino migrant workers, they have a strong association even in the destination countries. They are very well organized, they are together, and they have processes of getting organized, and they are connected through MOUs with the state, with the destination and origin countries. But no other countries have such, and even in GCC countries it's the worst, because most of the GCC countries have no laws to protect domestic workers, like Saudi Arabia and all. So that means, but many migrations are happening to uh, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and all, where domestic workers' rights are not at all protected. So this is a very tough situation that we are facing right now.
Thank you so much for speaking to us today, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
In Focus will be back soon with analysis of the biggest news issues. In the meantime, you can find our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and other platforms. Just search for In Focus by The Hindu. We'll see you soon.